Hello, a very good morning to you. It is Wednesday the 22nd of March and we are delighted to have you with us.
We certainly are. We've got loads coming up on the show today, like...
She's the subject of a new documentary, a book, and there's talk of maybe even a movie. Kerry native Mags Riordan will be sharing her story of resilience, loss and hope.
She's a fantastic woman. Looking forward to talking to her later on. Yeah. Also, a little bit later on in the show, Oscar nominee Emily Watson talks about the role of the Irish mammy and also nailing the Kerry accent, which she really does, as she stars opposite Paul Mescal in the new Irish movie God's Creatures.
She's cute.
She's absolutely lovely, and I didn't insult her in any way at all. It's totally fine. Everything's grand. I think you're going to be sent to do the celebrity interviews from now on.
Certainly not. Anyway, plus USA Today best-selling author Carmel Harrington takes us from Donegal Bay to Bermuda in her new historical romance novel.
First thing that you're going to be reading on your... Isn't that what he wants?
That'll be a delight.
Little known fact about Tommy Bowe, Richardson never stops watching it. Loves it, don't you? Romance? Your romance stuff. He's like, no, don't say that.
Well,
Alan,
there's a lot of little known facts about me, but it's definitely not Bridgerton. Al, how are we?
And we do know them all. Now, coming up later, also celebrity hairstylist Michael Douglas will share his A-list trestle taming tips. And we have Onion Bhajis in the kitchen at about 8:35. But now let's go over to the Virgin Media News Hub. Here's Anne O'Donnell.
Thanks, Alan. Good morning. Well, the government is facing a motion of no confidence next week over its handling of the ban on evictions. And it comes ahead of a vote this evening on a Sinn Féin motion looking to extend the ban until next year. Well, last night, the Labour leader Davina McCall confirmed her party will next week attempt to have government removed from office.
So I think we're going to have no option but to put down a motion of no confidence in your government next week. And it's not a measure, it's not an action we take lightly, it's something we take very seriously. We're conscious it's a very serious thing to do. But we are in a situation where we've seen a decision made by government, apparently at very short notice, apparently against what had previously been indicated.
For those of us old enough to remember when Margaret Thatcher withdrew free milk from schools in Britain, Thatcher, Thatcher, the milk snatcher was the campaign slogan. John Bruton and VAT on children's shoes almost brought down a government. That is your legacy. That is what people will associate with the name Darragh O'Brien into perpetuity, the minister who deliberately increased homelessness.
Well, for more on this now, let's cross over to government buildings to our reporter Cleona Russell, who's standing by for us. And Cleona, the government's controversial plan to lift the eviction ban was debated last night in the Dáil.
Yes, that's right, Anne. So that motion by Sinn Féin to extend the eviction ban to January 2024 debated in the Dáil last night. Heated exchanges, as you played there for viewers this morning. Sinn Féin warned the government is driving homelessness to a level that nobody ever thought was possible. And its spokesperson on housing, Eoin O'Brien, accused the government of willingly, consciously and knowingly increasing homelessness. Now, however, the Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, has said that the ban was only ever supposed to be a temporary measure, and he said that extending it would only make matters worse. He said then you would have people facing eviction just after Christmas in January, in the middle of winter, and he accused Sinn Féin of simply pushing the can down the line by wanting to extend this ban. He also said the Cabinet has signed off on a number of measures to act as a safety net for renters who maybe could face eviction in the coming months, such as the local authority buying more homes and tax changes for small landlords. Now, the vote on that motion is due to take place this evening. The government has said that it will accept the amendments suggested by the regional independent group on its counter motion. So certainly, Anne, things look right now as it stands, it looks like the government is set to win the vote this evening.
Fiona, thank you for that. Well, Gardaí are appealing for witnesses to a crash that has claimed the life of a teenager after he was hit by a truck in County Mayo. The incident happened yesterday evening on the Neil to Cong Road shortly before 5 p.m. The US has said it will be sending M1 tanks to Ukraine by autumn. The announcement from the Pentagon comes as the Chinese leader Xi Jinping is due to depart Moscow today after a display of solidarity with Russia.
A delegation of leaders and top officials from China and Russia meeting in Moscow yesterday. Xi Jinping's three-day visit, which began on Monday, is the first since Russia's invasion of Ukraine over a year ago and seen as a major political boost for Vladimir Putin. While economic ties have been discussed, NATO said yesterday that there are signs that Russia requested lethal aid from China.
And therefore our message has been that China should not provide lethal aid to Russia. That will be to support an illegal war and only prolong the war and support the legal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. That's something that China, of course, not should do.
Today's the final day of the visit. The political boost for Vladimir Putin came just days after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for the Russian leader on charges of alleged involvement in the abduction of thousands of children from Ukraine. Marie Mulcahy, Virgin Media News.
Police in the US remain on high alert for potential unrest ahead of the possible indictment of the former US President Donald Trump. Security has been stepped up in major US cities, including in New York and Washington, after Trump said on social media that he expected to be arrested and called for protests. While this has not happened, the arrest, a Manhattan prosecutor may charge Trump over a hush money payment to a former porn star. And now it's over to Ger for all the sport.
Thanks, Anne, and good morning. Stephen Kenny has confirmed that Evan Ferguson will make his first start for the Republic of Ireland in tonight's friendly against Latvia at the Aviva Stadium. The game is a warm-up for next week's opening Euro 2024 qualifier against France.
It's safe to say Evan Ferguson is a teenager with the world at his feet. Praised by Gary Lineker on social media after scoring twice for Brighton at the weekend, Ferguson will now make his first Ireland start against Latvia as the good times keep on coming for the striker.
Well, his career's in his infancy. He's had a great start to his Premier League career and scoring some goals in the Premier League and also in the FA Cup and the League Cup. And we've known about Evan for a few years now, coming through the system in Ireland with Bohemians and through the underage international team. So at 18 years of age now, he's shown that he's ready to come into the team, and he will make his debut tomorrow, his first start tomorrow night in the game.
Ferguson's timing could be perfect too. His first start is just days before France come to Dublin for a Euro qualifier next Monday. Kenny admits he will choose his team for this game with the France game in mind.
We have to manage some players' loads so they can maximise the performance against France. Like some of the players at the top end of the Championship who've been in the top end of the Championship and the FA Cup, and they've had 3 games a week for 4 or 5 weeks, and bringing them in, playing them again, going again next Monday, probably not the best way of optimising that performance. So we have to strategically think about that and give other players an opportunity as well.
So plenty of players looking to take their opportunity. Bernard O'Toole, Virgin Media Sport.
Republic of Ireland defender Matt Doherty has given his backing to his former Tottenham manager Antonio Conte. The Italian's future is in some doubt after comments he made about his players following their FA Cup draw with Southampton.
Look, I hope he stays for a long time at Tottenham. Unbelievable coach, unbelievable manager who won't say anything in the press that he won't say to his players. Completely honest with his players. Has the passion for the whole club, So for me, I hope Tottenham stick by him and hold on to him for as long as possible. He's one of the best managers of all time.
England defender Ben Chilwell has said the stigma around mental health needs to go after speaking about the help he received during his injury absence. Chilwell missed the World Cup through injury, but is back in the England squad for this week's qualifiers against Italy and Ukraine.
Yeah, for sure. I've been talking to someone for a few years now, and I think the stigma around it is silly, really, especially with men in football in particular. I think, as myself, someone that has been talking to someone for a few years now, and just the way that it's helped me, I think it can definitely help everyone. And like I said, just the stigma around it is something that is potentially needs to go.
That's your sport for now. We'll have more for you at 7:30. Now here's your weather.
For car insurance, van insurance or home insurance, call the Quote Devil. Unless, of course, you've got money to burn.
It'll be blustery this morning with sunny spells and well-scattered showers. The showers mainly affecting West Munster, Connacht and Ulster with highs of 7 to 9 degrees. This afternoon then the showers will become more widespread across the country, merging to longer spells of rain in places. Some of the showers will be heavy with hail and lightning possible. Top temperatures of 8 to 9 degrees in fresh and gusty south to southwest winds with strong on windward coasts, with the potential for wave overtopping around high tide. And tonight will be fresh and breezy overnight with clear spells and blustery showers. The showers most frequent across the western half of the country with lowest temperatures of 5 to 7 degrees and a moderate to fresh southerly breeze. And that's your weather outlook.
For first-time drivers, young drivers, returning drivers, if you've had an open claim or have had too many penalty points.
It's time now to take a look at this morning's papers. We'll start with the Irish Times. Its headline: Coalition confident it will win Dáil vote on eviction ban. The coalition is confident it will win a Dáil vote on the eviction ban, but could see its working majority tighten as some independent TDs look set to desert it over the controversial decision to allow the moratorium to expire. That vote is happening later this evening.
The Examiner leads with the same story. Coalition courts unaligned TDs in eviction ban vote. Government efforts to secure the backing of independents are set to go down to the wire ahead of tonight's eviction ban motion and an even more crucial no confidence vote next week.
Fair deal families to keep all income from renting homes. That's the front page of the Irish Independent. Nursing home residents will be able to keep all income from renting their family home under significant changes to the Fair Deal scheme.
Trans prisoners should not be in women's jails is the top story on the Daily Mail. Transgender prisoners convicted of violent crimes should not be housed in female prisons, Leo Varadkar has said.
The Sun leads with I'll never do drugs again after Pal died. Singer Ed Sheeran has vowed never to do drugs again after the death of his best friend.
The Star goes with I just went ballistic on her. A man accused of murdering model ex Jasmine McGonigal told Gardaí he punched and strangled Jasmine after she made a 999 call a court heard.
The Herald leads with if Quirk walks, they'll be held to pay. The daughter of murder victim Bobby Ryan has spoken of her shock at a court decision that ruled a major piece of evidence, which is data from a computer against the man convicted of killing her father, was seized unlawfully.
And the Mirror goes with Duleek of the Draw. Duleek of the Draw? Yeah. A County Meath village famed as the home for lotto millionaires has sold another jackpot-winning ticket worth €3.9 million. Duleek it is. I'm stopping off the way home.
Duleek of the Draw. You have to do that.
Absolutely.
You can say that like the... What is it? The RD Gardaí?
The RD Gardaí.
Love it. I'm going to get him to say Duleek of the Draw all day. After the break, you know what we're going to be talking about? From the latest in what's going on with not Duleek, from the eviction ban, are politicians playing politics with this, to changes to the Fair Deal scheme, as we just mentioned in the headlines there. We'll be bringing you up to speed on the latest housing news.
We'll be back with that after this.
Welcome back. Now, the coalition government is said to be confident they will win tonight's vote to end the eviction ban, a vote of, it's mad what's going on.
A political reporter with the Irish Times, Jack Horgan-Jones, is here to bring us up to speed. Jack, you've reported on this at the front of the Times this morning. Yes. It's also on the front of the Examiner, but this is going to be a big story today.
Yes, it'll be the main political story today, and it has been really for a little while, because we knew this was coming, this Sinn Féin motion on extending the eviction ban. We knew that was coming for a week or 10 days. Now, the way the Parliament works is that when a motion gets put down like this, the government can actually come in and put down an amendment. So what the Dáil ends up voting on is not actually the question from Sinn Féin as to whether to extend the ban. It's a much more rosy endorsement of government policy. So they kind of override the question and say, actually, here's the many ways in which we're brilliant, and would you like to have a vote on that instead? So that's actually what the vote ends up being on. So they're being asked to kind of validate or stand behind government housing policy. And if you read the counter motion that was published last night, it's basically 5 or 6 pages of everything that the government is doing and some important concessions. And that's kind of where the stories this morning are focusing on. Some important concessions to some of the regional independent group. It's a group of about 7 or 8 TDs who tend to vote with the government, particularly on important matters like elections electing the Taoiseach or a confidence motion or something like that.
So like Michael Lowry and...
Yes, exactly. Yeah, Michael Lowry, Dennis Knox, exactly, people like that. So they made a list of demands in the last, over the weekend and into the first part of this week, saying, look, can you do this, that and the other in your motion? And when you read the fine text of that 5-page, 2,000-word plus motion, you do see that many of those things are in there, or versions of them are in there.
You scratch my back.
But hold on, it's
less so a kind of direct,
But as we think of people playing politics, especially over this issue, it's not, I want my local road tarred. It is essentially all of the regional independent group are asking for things to do with housing.
It is, yeah. So you're right. Like, I mean, the traditional version of this is like, seeking support for a coalition, the Tony Gregory stuff, the big package of investment in Dublin's North Inner City back in the day, or at budget time, you might get a particular kind of pork barrel project, a road in your constituency, something like that. This is more policy focused, so they are kind of narrowly like housing policy things that they've asked for, and they are in there because the government was a little bit worried about losing its majority on this, and that is one of the things that's running through that, because one of the Green TDs has said, look, I'm actually going to vote against this. That reduces the government's majority to a razor thin. It'll only have 80 on paper.
So that's Nessa Horgan.
That's Nessa Horgan, yeah. Now, the interesting thing is that even though it's on paper majority, the people that it can command using a whip is 80. Usually it's been bigger. That comes back to that stuff about the regional independent group that we were saying earlier on. They tend to vote with the government, and that's why you're seeing this play, I suppose, within the motion to make concessions to that group of independent TDs, so they come in as a kind of buffer, even if that on-paper majority is smaller. The working majority
is it, do you think?
Well, I mean, as I say, on paper, if they lose Nessa Horgan, it's 80. They have 80 votes, and obviously that's a bare majority. If they lose one more, they lose
one more. Then,
but they have been without that before. So Nessa Horgan lost the whip last year, as did her party colleague Patrick Costello. So for those 6 months, they actually didn't have a majority. But because this group of independents were voting with them, they were able to pass legislation. So it's about being able to pass legislation as opposed to necessarily having that kind of exact majority.
Listen, they've been jostling. It's going to happen. It's continuing happening all day. We've seen Ono Brim from Sinn Féin stand up and talk about how this is a tragedy of our times and we are coming for you yesterday in the Dáil. If they lose, it's not going to happen, is it? But if they lose... I don't think so. No, you don't think so?
This is the funny thing about politics. It's a really important and meaningful vote, right? Because of what it signifies or what the symbolism is. But if they lose, it doesn't mean anything. It's a non-binding, non-legally binding motion. It's like the Dáil would pass it and it would go into committee where the government would smother it at birth. So nothing would happen. It's not new law or anything like that.
So it doesn't mean anything?
But it means something politically. So like it would mean that it would like if they lost it, it would show that they were like especially vulnerable on housing issues, and they're facing into a vote of confidence next week.
So what about
difference between a motion and a vote of confidence is that if the government can't win a vote of confidence, that says the Dáil doesn't have confidence in the government, the Taoiseach has to resign, the government has to resign. And
next week is probably more important.
It is, but again, bear with me, they're more likely to win it because it's more important. Because this isn't legally binding and because it's on a very emotive issue, you're more likely to get independents saying, do you know what, just to keep the government, and because there's no cost associated with this, I'm going to vote against the government. If it comes to next week, the vote of confidence is in the entire government, not necessarily in housing policy or in the Minister for Housing, who's protected because he had a vote of confidence within the last 6 months. So they're more likely to say, look, I don't necessarily want to be on the doors in the next couple of weeks with the second or third Sinn Féin candidate nipping at my heels. They're in a similar position. And in the round, I probably have confidence in the government, whereas I may not have confidence in their housing policy. I don't want to cause an election. So I suspect they're actually more secure in next week's more important vote than they are in this week's less important vote.
This week still means about the eviction ban. So people who could be evicted.
But if they lost it, the eviction ban would still expire. But it's like all these things, it's all about the symbolism and the significance of it. You know, as I was saying, if they lost it, it would show how vulnerable they are on housing. It would show that like they can't command strong majorities on housing motions. And while that might not matter today or tomorrow, in the context of a rolling housing crisis and homelessness crisis that's going to get worse and worse and worse over the summer, it just shows they have a weak underbelly on this stuff. And maybe not this motion or next week's motion, but down the road, something could come along on housing that could really prove challenging and could bring down the government. That's the importance of it.
We're just wondering what you make of this, because, of course, this is all drama and spectacle within the Dáil, which always happens. We know that, but it can be incredibly frustrating when someone's sitting at home going, I have no idea if I'm going to be evicted because this could be coming down the line because of this. And whether you think it's time for a general election, 0896 111 111, because Sinn Féin decided not to put down a vote of no confidence.
Yes.
And Labour said, if you don't do it, we will.
Yeah.
And it's weird, it's in because there's been lots of votes from Sinn Féin of no confidence. The fact that they decided, no, we're not going to do it because they know that they're going to lose that.
And it's because, as we said, there's this kind of rallying effect of emotion, no confidence, you know.
So when the coalition put together their proposal that has to be voted on and talking about all the great things that they've done, did they take into account that it's record house prices, record rents, record levels of homelessness? So what can they try and tell people that they're doing right?
Look, this is the problem.
They're actually failing in all the three areas.
This is the problem, and this is why the motion has been put down. It's because, notwithstanding all the bluster and all the kind of reams of copy and pages that they'll list off and policies and this, that, and the other, you know, as you say, all the indicators are going in the wrong direction. And, like, you know, the problem is objectively getting worse. You know, like, it's a more expensive, less secure market than it was when they came into power, notwithstanding all the interventions that they've made. And that's
$1 billion.
Yeah,
of
exactly.
A budget.
Yeah,
$1 billion.
and more. You know, $4 billion a year on capital funding. Like, so much money they actually can't even spend it.
Yeah.
They end up with leftover money at the end of the year, and that's the problem that they face. You know, the credibility of the coalition is going to be made or broken on the issue of housing. And when you look at the polling as well, you can see that, like, when people are asked, so the Sunday Independent are running polling series on this, when people are asked, who do you think is performing best? Darragh O'Brien comes in quite low, and, like, he's well thought of within the coalition. He's thought of as a potential Fianna Fáil leader, potential Taoiseach in the future, all these kind of things. But, like, he is associated now with the housing crisis. And when you look at last weekend's Sunday Times poll, the hit that was taken for the government was Fianna Fáil, not Fine Gael, down 4%. So I think that's an interesting dynamic as well. The Fine Gael seemed to be a little bit more
yesterday.
But it's become the health poison chalice. Is what housing has certainly become.
It's very similar to health. You know?
There is more stories in the paper. Most projects to renovate vacant buildings, which they were all talking about. We're going to give you loads of grants to renovate vacant buildings. They're too costly. People can't afford to do that because everything has gotten too costly. But can we talk about, it's been in the news there, the Fair Deal scheme?
Yes.
Nursing home residents are to keep all the income from renting out their property. This is under new changes to the legislation.
So, and again, this is part of that kind of, you know, those concessions that they're looking to make to shore up the votes. And it's probably something they wanted to do anyway, to shore up the support from the independents, because the independents asked for reforms of Fair Deal as part of the kind of the deal they're striking.
So what's going to happen?
This wasn't actually on the list that they looked for. So basically, long story short, if you're in a nursing home and you rent out your home, your primary home, it used to be the case that the state took 80% of that to pay towards the cost of your nursing home care. That was then cut to 40%. And now the signals that we're getting, both in our own paper this morning, we report this, and the Irish Independent have it as well, is that they're going to get rid of that entirely. So you'll be able to retain all the income that you get from renting out your home. The idea being that they don't want anyone sitting in a nursing home who has a vacant property. They want that property actually put out there onto the open market,
people aren't,
so it eases the supply issues.
Yeah, because people aren't doing that because
people aren't doing that just because they think, like, look, you know, if I don't,
be taken off.
A lot of it is being taken off me anyway. Now you'll still have to pay tax on it, but like, you know, it does. It would seem like kind of low hanging fruit. Now you'd wonder where they're going to make up the other side of the ledger, because obviously, you know,
it's going to be
nursing
costly.
Home, exactly.
But you still get the money, right, when you sell the house. Isn't that like?
Yes. Now I'm not an expert on the fine detail of Fair Deal, but
there still will be.
When the estate is liquidated,
the government get the house.
Yeah, that's Fair Deal. So basically, they get to make their money
now
back.
It's capped on something. So like basically, when you die, you sell the home, and some of that is then recouped to pay for the cost of your care.
Yeah, which is what they had to do.
But this is all around votes again.
It's all around votes, it's all around trying to shore up those.
Well, they've been talking about reform of it for quite a while.
They have. As I said, I suspect it's something they want to do anyway. It's a sweetener, basically. And it is a rental market reform that you would hope would reduce vacancy and increase the amount of properties in the market. Because, look, they're having to throw everything at it, but it's still, as we said, there's still, as one person said to me yesterday, it's like trying to run up an escalator that's going in the wrong way.
It certainly feels like that, doesn't it?
Let
us know what you think. Yeah, absolutely. 0896 111 111. I mean, this is where politics gets mental, isn't it?
I know, yeah. Listen,
and complicated.
And complicated. And he's got and he understands it. He knows what's actually going on. We've got lots more still to come this morning on Ireland AM.
See you shortly.
Now, we love this. A new report has found that Ireland is the most lenient parenting nation in Europe.
Dun, dun, dun. And who better better to discuss this than a man who basically tries to keep politicians from squabbling all of the time like they're children. Jack Horgan-Jones from the Irish Times has stayed with us. Hello, Jack. How are you?
I'm brilliant. How are you?
You're brilliant. Yeah. We just thought after all the housing, which is
a bit intense, wasn't it?
We'll calm it down with a little bit of this. Parents are the most lenient, Irish parents.
So, yeah.
I would 100% say an Irish mammy with her sons, there you go, blows it out of the water.
Yeah. Let them do what they want.
Absolutely.
56% apparently of Irish parents agree they take a relaxed approach to raising their children by enforcing only a few or inconsistent rules. So that's in contrast to the Netherlands. We don't have a figure for how strict the disciplinarians of the Netherlands are. Apparently they are the most strict.
Netherlands known for being
yeah, exactly. Yeah, quite a permissive culture, apparently not in parenting. But Irish parents, 30% less likely to expect their children to help with things like household chores. So an interesting one. I was trying to think myself, am I a disciplinarian parent?
Are you?
This? I don't think so.
How many have you got?
I
have two.
Yeah, what ages?
4.5 and one and a bit.
Oh, the 1 and a bit.
Yeah.
The 4.5, like, okay, would you...
Get out there and do the lawn.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is like, some of it is like, they were most likely here to let their children stay up late.
Yeah.
So if your 4.5 wants to stay up a bit later, would you let? It's a boy or a girl?
It's a girl, yeah.
A girl.
Yeah,
would you let her stay up late?
She tends to get to,
exactly.
She's sitting there watching the Tonight Show, shouting at the politicians.
I feel like I spend a lot of time enforcing rules and stuff like that, but then when I think back on it, it's kind of like, but what am I like holding back? It's very little, and what am I asking for in return? It's like 2 more bites of dinner, and then you get like as many treats as you want, and you can watch telly. So really,
if you eat that Brussels sprout, I let you get a treat.
Oh, it's not even a Brussels sprout. It's like mashed potato.
Like it's something delicious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And we always know the soft touch when it comes to parents. Like we know which one to target. Like in my house,
that's because kids are like instinctive. They're brilliant.
Heat-seeking soft touch missiles.
It's a war of attrition. Exactly, yeah. They come up and they kind of like, can I sit in your lap? Can I go and watch?
Are you the soft touch?
I think so.
You are
exactly.
soft
But
touch.
again, it's only when I look back, because I like to think of myself as, the rule maker and the disciplinarian. But of course, when the evidence doesn't support this.
But I love it. Are you like this at home? Or are you a soft touch? Or are you a strict disciplinarian at home? Because I love this as well, though. It says we are top of the list of getting hands-on with our children. And like over 70% teach their children how to cook. Yeah. Which is lovely.
What really jumped out at me as well is this line about Irish parents claim what they didn't like about their own upbringing.
Yes.
So 84% of Irish parents say that what they didn't like about their own upbringing influences their parenting style now. So I wonder, is it a case that, like, a generation or two ago, the pendulum was all the way over this way and, we're being battered within an inch of our lives, sleep in the coal shed and all the rest. And because the current generation of parents is so traumatised by that, it swung all the way back. And we're a little bit too permissive.
And the school upbringing, a lot of our parents, even younger generations, would have gone through really harsh disciplinarian schooling.
Exactly, yeah.
Schooling. Right. You get the strap, you go up and you get the strap.
Like, it's not that long ago that all that stuff happened. Yeah. Exactly, so you can see why we've gone, we're just going to...
So now we're too liberal. Now they'll swing back with our kids,
Oh, you think? Yeah, no, Jack, you're a soft touch. I can't even get her to do... We want to hear from you. 089 611 111. What can your kids get away with, like, even by saying
let them get away with?
And how does it happen? Because the way it says that, the parents, if you're in a 2-parent household, because I can't imagine how hard this is when you're a single parent just trying to get them to bed, that you have to stick together.
Yeah.
I know in my house, Dad would say something, Mum would be like, "Your grand, don't worry about it." Like, they did not stick together in parenting.
Yeah.
That you can't do that. And for single parents, how do you do it? 089 611 111. We're the most lenient parents in Europe. I like to hear that. That's a good thing. Now, speaking of parents trying to handle the vomiting bug, there's been a surge.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that I think if it comes into the house, everyone's getting it. There's not much you can do about it. But there has been a surge. So almost 400 cases of norovirus, more commonly known as the winter vomiting bug, have been diagnosed so far in 2023, which is almost 4 times the number that was diagnosed in all of 2022. So 109 diagnosed in all of 2022. We're only, three and a bit months into 2023, and we've already got 4 times that number. And it seems that the villain of the piece, as is so often the case, is our old friend, the pandemic, because everyone stayed in for the guts of 2 years. They weren't seeing each other. They weren't getting exposed to pathogens or viruses or whatever. And this is a story that's now as old as the hills. Now we have no acquired immunity at the population level or the individual level. So any virus that comes in the door, everyone's going to fall ill with it. And the consequence of this one can be quite severe, as anyone who has had norovirus knows.
And obviously most serious then in children and the elderly. And that's who they're more worried about.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, it's those vulnerable groups of people who tend not to be able to look out for themselves. They're doctors are advising to keep an eye on. So, like, if you have a child, that, check that the nappies are full and, make sure that they're getting enough fluids and all the rest of it, because it does seem like it's a short, sharp and very unpleasant illness, but it does seem to pass through in a few days. And what they're saying as well is that, like, much like with the higher trolley crisis that we had at the start of the year, this will work its way through the system. It'll take kind of 8, 12, 16 weeks, but they do expect this is something that will come and go. And then hopefully next year, because we're all seeing each other again, you'll have that bit more acquired immunity, so you won't have these kind of particularly nasty spikes.
It lives on surfaces for quite a long time, and they're saying, like, even the hand gels don't work. It's basic hygiene of washing your hands with soap and water.
Just burn the house down.
A lenient parent there. Oh, you don't want to have burn the house down. It's fine, don't worry about it. We're going to move on to something else. These were the fanciest things in the entire world when I was a child, and I'm not joking. They are the Kellogg's variety packs. I think I remember getting them.
That's how you know it's Christmas, because the variety packs are
that's how I knew it was summer, because we were allowed to get one variety pack if we were going to Daniel and Kerry, and it was like the variety. You didn't want to open them. They were so
they were so perfect. They're so pleasing and
like,
small.
I just wanted to look
so
at them.
tell us what's happening. Why are Kellogg's in trouble?
So they're in trouble because everyone knows the variety packs, as they're saying, they're an item of nostalgia and current importance as well, because they're still available on all the shelves, but they're taking out Frosties. They're taking out one of the good ones.
Why?
I don't know.
It says it contains 37 grams of sugar per 100 grams.
But could they not take out the cornflakes, Take out one of the boring ones.
Take out one of the boring ones. Now, they've already done
But
this.
obviously the problem is that, and obviously there's nutritional upshot to this, and like there's a sugar tax and all the rest of it. So I suspect they're trying to keep it within that kind of affordability bracket, because if there's more sugar in it, then the price goes up, and that's good public policy. You want people to be eating less sugar, but it's significantly less crack at breakfast.
Back in our day, you used to be able to get ricicles. The space one, the space code, the space ones.
Captain Rick. I remember
Captain
the mascot
Rick.
and everything.
You could get Start inside it.
All of these things have now been banned for basically being the crack cocaine.
But is that not good?
Breakfast cereal.
I know, but is it not good when you see it? Like it had 2 times more sugar than Cocoa Pops, 4 times more sugar than cornflakes.
That's what I couldn't wrap my head around. 4 times more sugar than maybe than cornflakes, but 2 times more sugar than Cocoa Pops. I would have thought Cocoa Pops would be the top of the list. Now in fairness, they seemingly have put an extra Cocoa Pops in, so it's not as if they're trying to pawn you off with it.
Not really a variety pack anymore, is it?
That's true, you could just buy Cocoa Pops.
What's left is Cocoa Pops, Rice Krispies, cornflakes, and Rice Krispies multi-grain shapes. Good one.
We're loving that for breakfast.
How are they enticing children with that? Okay, get 0896 111 111. I'm not going to ask you about your variety pack stories. If you want to send them in, that's fine. But foods discontinued, all that kind of stuff. It makes me sad.
And the bars all getting smaller.
The bars all getting smaller.
The chocolate bars are definitely getting smaller.
A club milk is 95 cent now.
It won't be much to discipline your kids with. Eat that up, but there's no multigrain shake for you.
Jack Horgan Jones, you have put in a fierce shift with us this morning. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the vote tonight.
Yes.
Even though, as Jack explained, it means nothing. Thank you for that, Jack Horgan Jones from the Irish Times. Break time now. After this, we're taking a closer look at the president of China's visit to Russia. Fun. Variety
Very
packs.
entertaining on the show this morning.
Continues his 3-day visit in Russia. Are China about to officially take sides in this war?
Joining us to discuss, good morning. Joining us to discuss is Professor of Politics at the School of Law and Government in DCU, Donnacha Ó Beacháin. Thank you so much for joining us, Donnacha. So what's the significance of this meeting between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping? Because they've met 40 times?
40 times since Xi became president, and it meant a lot to Putin. I think this meeting underlined the kind of asymmetry of power between Russia and China. I mean, China's economy is 10 times bigger than Russia. So there was a lot of pomp and ceremony,
he rolled out the red carpet.
Oh, he did. There was an imperial grandeur, and, a lot was read into the body language. Things like Xi extending the hand first. He's not the host. But it kind of underlined the subordinate position that Russia has now, because they've moved away from Europe. They're now redirecting all their energy supplies and trade with China.
I'm sorry. He offered the hand first.
Yeah.
That's a sign of superiority, is it?
Yeah, because if you're the host, you're usually the one extending the hand to the guest.
Can I ask you, because a lot is made of this all of the time. These body language experts get involved when all these things happen. Are they consciously thinking about this? Because I know Vladimir Putin is very into how things should be done, and he's always 5 steps ahead of everyone.
standing on a step.
Does it matter?
Well, these things are tightly
things.
choreographed, even down to the fact that, you know, when Xi would have arrived at Moscow airport, he would have driven along an absolutely car-free highway. I lived in dictatorships before in Central Asia, for example. They used to shut down the city when a visiting dignitary would come. It was very frustrating to the ordinary person, but it emphasised to the ordinary person, you're nothing. You know, the important president is coming now, and he would have seen billboards of himself and Putin along the way. So everything, you know, even down to the courses that they had, a 7-course meal, 4 hours of talking over it, everything was planned down to a T. So little things like that, they tend to be noticed because of the choreography.
Right. So if it's choreographed down to the smallest bit, why then has he gone over just a few days after the ICC has announced warrants to arrest Vladimir Putin? Well, obviously that would have been thought about too.
This is a very interesting observation. Why now? And it does, you know, help Putin. I mean, he is a friend in need, essentially. And they did emphasise how great their friendship is. Putin indeed described Xi as a comrade. And as you say, it comes right after the ICC, you know, issuing this warrant, which really underlies the pariah status that Putin now enjoys globally. So he would have been reaching out the hand. Xi would have been reaching out the hand. You have to remember that now, you know, Putin's travel plans are very heavily circumscribed. I mean, if he wants to travel to Ireland or indeed 123 other countries in the world, he will be arrested. You know,
it's a big statement by Xi to do that.
It is. And inviting him also to come back to China later this year is also a statement that you're safe in China because, as I said, the majority of the states in the world now are obligated to arrest Vladimir Putin should he arrive on their territory.
But it's not like China are signed up to the UN Charter of Human Rights or anything like that, you know? Like, they very much operate by themselves. And is this sort of two fingers to the international community, to the UN, to the International Criminal Court going, we don't care?
Oh, very much so. But it's also, you know, the world is divided into two ways of organising society. There are democracies like ourselves, and we'd like to see more of them. And there are autocracies and dictatorships. And, you know, China, therefore, wants Russia to thrive, not only because it's now a new source of energy. It eclipsed Saudi Arabia as the main source of energy during the last year. But also, it's the brand. I mean, the autocracies want their brand of government to thrive. So Russia, for example, loses in Ukraine. It means the brand is diminished. It's tarnished. And Xi doesn't want that, which is one of the reasons why people are suggesting he's coming out with this 12-point plan now.
His peace plan.
His peace plan.
For Ukraine and Russia.
I mean, it augments, you know, China's position in the world, at least rhetorically, but it also potentially freezes the conflict because this conflict is not in China's interest. China is focused on business. They were taken aback by Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and they would like to see it come to an end as soon as possible.
So he is trying to introduce this peace plan. He wants a 12-point plan to try and do that. Where does that leave China, though, in respect to Taiwan?
Yeah, I mean, some people argue that the fact that the first point in this 12-point peace plan emphasises territorial integrity, sovereignty, is really about Taiwan because, you know, in many respects, China doesn't respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Otherwise, it wouldn't be supporting Russia to the extent that it does. So it's more with that in line so that they can't be called out later on Taiwan. Taiwan is central to the Chinese way of thinking.
But they want Russia and Ukraine to come to peace, but there is potential for them to go to war over...
Oh, absolutely. And if the two biggest economies of the world, the US and China, ever go to war, it will be over Taiwan. Yeah. It won't be over Ukraine. It will be over Taiwan.
Just at that point in the peace plan of stating how much the territory would belong to Russia, that is saying that where they have captured, that's still yours. That's part of China's peace plan. That's number one.
That's how Ukraine interprets it. That's how the West interprets it. This would be freezing the realities now, which of course would be to the benefit of Russia because Russia has seized territory, it has captured people, and to freeze everything would be essentially rewarding the aggression that's taken place.
Can I ask you, because world economies are shrinking, we are talking about looking at a possible recession, there's issues with the banking sector again. China's economy is shrinking. Like, slowly, by a tiny bit, but it doesn't need to have its economic partners around the world. It does need export. Its export trade is the biggest thing in the world. Well, could there be possibilities of economic sanctions? Like, could anything be done? Or because China is the world's bank, essentially the US owes them so much money, are they safe?
They're not safe, and certainly they're walking a very fine line. They haven't done anything to, we'll say, go against the Western sanctions on Russia. They don't vote with Russia at the United Nations, for example. They abstain. So they don't want to be drawn into this because they're far more interconnected into the global economy than Russia is.
Yeah.
So this would be bad for business. And at the end of the day, even though Putin is a friend in need, ultimately China will look after its own interests. And they're not going to help Russia to the extent that it will jeopardise Chinese national interests.
OK. It's fascinating stuff. Even the handshaking, even Xi Jinping. So Xi is actually his surname. So it's the wrong way around, learning everything this morning.
That's right. Just one other thing. We should contrast Xi's visit to Moscow because it was eclipsed. It did eclipse another visit, which was the visit of the Japanese Prime Minister to Ukraine.
Yeah.
And therefore, you had the world's second and third largest economies in the opposing capitals, Moscow and Kiev, at the same time, which goes to show you how Ukraine has brought the world to take a side, one side or the other.
Wow.
I just think that this hour of the show has been great for the blood pressure. Donnacha Ó Beacháin, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back with you on Ireland AM very shortly.
And the mayor goes with Duleek of the Draw, a County Meath village famed as home for lotto millionaires, has sold another jackpot-winning ticket worth €3.9 million.
We're all moving to
We're going to Duleek.
We're all moving to Duleek today.
Unreal.
Do you pass
Duleek of the Draw.
Do you pass it?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Can we
I was going to
start?
call in and going to go and buy a few tickets.
Can we start what are they called?
A syndicate.
Syndicate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Tommy's like, yeah, fine, give me the money. We're not a syndicate.
What are house prices in Duleek like? Now, listen to this. We were chatting about this earlier on. The report that Ireland is the most lenient parenting nation in Europe, with over 56% of Irish parents agreeing that they take a relaxed approach when raising their children. So we asked you to send in texts on that. Or have you a relaxed approach to your parenting? And Claire says, I'm very lenient with my kids on purpose. My parents were very strict to me and I just want my children to have fun and enjoy their childhoods. And I think that was top of the list, wasn't it, earlier on, that I think 70% or 76% of parents now said they take that attitude because of the way they were reared and they felt it was too strict. And they don't want their children to go through that.
Absolutely, 100%.
Anna said, I think parents these days are much too easy on their children, especially around things like technology. I limit my 6-year-old's screen time to 30 minutes a day and she's happy out. She loves playing outside. Hopefully that will continue.
What do you think about that?
Are
Do
you
you
a strict
limit your
parent?
screen time?
Yeah, I don't know. Grant, what about Barry's message?
No, but are you a strict
Are
parent?
you a strict parent?
Sometimes, yeah. Lucy's definitely the strict one in our house.
Are you the one that they can easily
There's
get
a
around?
message quick to read there, sorry.
Doesn't want to talk about his
Tommy's not
parenting.
divulging his parenting
He doesn't want to talk about his parenting skills at all. Barry says, too many young people aren't taught the basics of cooking, cleaning and budgeting. And it doesn't set them up for life. We need more practical skills. Where do you think that they should learn the practical
in
skills, everybody?
schools.
In schools, starting from primary school age. Yet another thing that we're
the
asking
teachers
the
have to
teachers
do.
to have to do. Shouldn't we be teaching children how to do chores at home?
Absolutely.
Rather than making the schools do it. Sorry, Barry, I completely agree with what you're saying, 100%, but we expect teachers to do the jobs that parents should be doing an awful lot of the time.
I love Grania's one where
my
she
opinion
says,
on it.
the best advice she ever got, pick your battles.
Listen, amen to
Pick
that.
your battles. Grania says the best advice she ever got, pick your battles.
Let us know what you think. Do you
That's a
think
good one.
us Irish parents are far too lenient? We'd love to hear from you. 0896 111 111. Now, after the break, we're going to be hearing the inspirational story of one Kerry woman who turned tragic loss into hope and a mission to help others. We'll see you after this short break.
You are very welcome back. Our next guest has gone through more than most people could ever imagine, having lost 3 children in 3 separate tragic circumstances.
Following the death of her son Billy in Malawi in 1999, Mags Riordan went on to set up a health clinic in the country. And Mags joins us now. Good morning to you, Mags. Thank you so much. Let's talk about Billy. He was a boy who loved to travel and visited Malawi a number of times before his death in 1999.
Yeah, he did a lot of travelling. He started travelling when he was about 17. And he'd been between 17 and 25. He had managed to get a degree from NUIG, and he also had visited many parts of the world, Australia, New Zealand, South America, Southeast Asia and Africa on 3 separate occasions.
He'd done a lot. Well, he really did, like, he picked up his bags when he was 17. He was like, bye, Mum, I'll see you.
Kind of, yeah.
And
kind of, yeah.
Because I think, did he go to Malawi like 4 times? He kept on going
Three
back?
times, yeah.
Three times.
The third time he went was the last time. That was the fatal time.
What happened? It was a swimming accident.
Yeah. Well, we assume it must have been a brain hemorrhage. We didn't do a PM because by the time we got his remains back to Ireland, it was 3 weeks later, and a PM would have been very inconclusive.
A post-mortem wouldn't have told you what was happening at that stage.
Well, this was it, and you know, I kind of felt people sort of said to me afterwards, or at the time, you're going to regret it afterwards if you don't go and have this PM. But actually, you know, 20 odd years later, I still don't regret it. It wouldn't have changed anything.
Okay.
And it wouldn't have made any difference. So I didn't see the point. And we'd already waited a few weeks for his remains to be returned, and a PM would have delayed it even further. And so we just said no.
You just wanted to be able to bury your son.
Yeah.
But I mean, sadly, Billy wasn't the only child that you lost. Previously, you had lost your daughter Niamh and son Luke in separate circumstances.
That was many years before that.
Yeah.
Did that make it just that even more difficult when Billy passed away?
Yeah, obviously it did. It did. Yeah, it did. But I always thought that there would be a third one.
Why?
I don't know. I just felt that. I just felt that from very, very early on. And I voiced that to people. People will tell you today that I said that 20 years before Billy died. I didn't know which one of my remaining children it would be, because there were 3 of them.
You have Emma and Jennifer.
And Billy, yeah.
And Billy.
And I just felt it, you know. It was weird.
It is weird to have that sort of a feeling.
It was a premonition almost.
Yeah, because it does feel, for anyone who's at home, and Niamh and Luke were very young, they were both 4 months old, to imagine I can't imagine how you get up in the morning. But you keep on going because you had other children.
Well, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. And people, you know, have said to me over the years, how did you keep going? How did you keep going? And I'm going, well, if you go down, you bring a lot of other people with you.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do that.
But, you know, you're on the surface. Do you feel sometimes you're kind of going through the motions for everybody else, and there's a lot going on behind the veil in you emotionally?
Maybe up to a point.
Right.
But, you know, time does heal. You know, you never forget. Yeah. But you learn to live with things, and you learn to, I suppose, compartmentalise as well, you know. And yeah, but as I say, I mean, I think the thing people need to remember really is that you know, you've got to keep going for other people. You know, 100%. As I said, otherwise you bring other people down, and that's not the way to go.
Did you find going over to Malawi, to the scene of the death, you planted a memorial stone for Billy over there? Did that help?
I suppose it did, even though at the time I wasn't conscious of that. I just wanted to, I wanted to go to Malawi, I wanted to see the place.
Because he called it paradise.
Yeah, and going from one paradise, which is West Kerry, to another paradise, you know, I mean, I'm very fortunate. And so, yeah, I wanted to go. But then when I went and I saw what I saw and witnessed what I witnessed, and the poverty and the lack of healthcare and the lack of education and the lack of employment and just everything, I was appalled, because we're spoilt Westerners, you know, and we have no idea how people live in other parts of the world. And I was completely taken aback by everything. And then I just thought, well, I can do something here, you know. And so, yeah,
because
sometimes
I suppose with everything that we're talking about, it's hard to imagine how rich we are as a country, and we're managing to fail people in this incredibly rich country. And you went to Malawi, which is so
incredibly
deprived.
poor. Yeah,
like I'd say, I can't even imagine.
No,
you know, you watch the documentaries, you see things, but you can't.
It doesn't prepare you, because back in the 90s, I watched documentaries about the war in Bosnia, and I saw stuff on the television, and then I went, and it's completely different when you're actually there. And it was exactly the same when I went to Malawi.
What are they like in terms of, say, health, for instance?
Well, our district hospital in Malawi, which is 100 kilometres from the clinic, there's one doctor for 1 million people.
Wow.
What?
Yes, yeah.
And that's
now,
100 kilometres away.
They do have a separate system whereby they train what they call clinical officers, and they do 4 years medical training, and they're very, very good. But they're not fully qualified doctors. They do have some clinical officers in this hospital, but one medical doctor as such, even today.
I can't, we just can't understand that. Like, that just means if you get sick, you're going to get, there's going to be very little help.
You may see a clinical officer or you may not. It's just impossible to understand it. And
is that...
you know, from a human right point of view, it's so wrong that people don't have access to healthcare.
To anything.
And is that why, when you went over there to what Billy said was paradise, but they can't have healthcare, you decided to set up a clinic, clinic in his name?
Exactly. I mean, initially I was going to do something in education because they had one primary school. They had up to 300 children in a class. And I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll do something in education. And then one day I was there and a dad came to me with a little boy who'd been knocked down by a bicycle. And he had a huge gash on his knee. And there was no healthcare, there was no antibiotics, nothing. And I knew this kid would die if he wasn't treated. It should have been sutured, it should have been looked after like that, but I wasn't qualified to do that. But I just dressed the wound for 10 days, put him on a course of antibiotics because I had loads of antibiotics with me as a spoiled Westerner. We had all the stuff. Yeah. And so that child survived, and that child is in the village. Well, he's not actually in the village today, but he's around. I meet him from time to time. And then I realised, what's the point in doing something for the school? The children aren't living long enough to go to school. You know, they're...
Mags.
So I said, right, let's start at the beginning. Let's start with the clinic. And that's how it all began.
And when was that?
I started fundraising in October 2003. And we opened the first building in 2004. We opened the second building in 2008. We opened the third building in 2016. And now I'm hoping to raise enough money to open a maternity unit because we don't have a maternity unit at the moment.
And we all know that is one of the most dangerous times in a woman's life.
Well, yes, and
the infant mortality rate or parental mortality rate in Ireland.
Well, in Malawi, it's one of the highest.
One of the highest in the
mortality rates, the maternal mortality rate. And so, you know, we've just had Cyclone Freddy in Malawi, as you may or may not have known. And the road out of our village was completely washed away. So if somebody needs to go to the hospital to have their baby, there were days went by when they couldn't go.
I mean, you've saved thousands of people already with this clinic, and of course with the work that you're continuing to do. It is part of a new documentary called In the Name of the Sun, which is going to be on RTE. Just cameras, I suppose, highlighting the amazing work and seeing what an amazing place it is, but the desperate circumstances that these people are in.
Yeah. It's you know, picture paints 1,000 words.
Mm. And the thing is, you're right. This will help fundraising efforts for you trying to save more lives.
Hopefully, because we, you know, as I said, we need to build a maternity unit now. Yeah. It was something that was, you know, always going to come, but we had other stuff to do first.
Yeah.
Like a HIV/AIDS clinic being one.
This is the plan. Like, you're just keeping on going. Can I ask your opinion on, and I'm not calling you this at all, you're over there, you're living on the ground, you've started to come home, I think, were you saying 4 times a year, whereas you used to live over there about 8 months of the year. This is your life's mission and your life's work. What do you make of, I suppose, in recent years, the rise of the sort of white saviour, people who go off for 2 weeks and bring a camera to a country who's like Yemen or Ethiopia where there's a famine happening? What do you make of that?
I think if you can bring you know, people's attention to a particularly bad situation, I think it's probably a good thing. But I think in a lot of cases, people don't really understand what they're facing into until they actually get there. It's like people on the other side of the world have no idea what our life is like.
Yeah.
They really don't.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge information gap between the first world and the developing world.
Do your daughters, Emma and Jennifer, do they go over?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, one of my daughters and her husband, and their 3 children, my 3 grandchildren, were there in October. So yeah, it was an eye-opener for them.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah, I mean, 13, 11 and 9.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And so, you know, they saw
children
who had no shoes on their feet.
Yeah.
You know?
to kind of to realise the privilege.
Yeah.
Are your daughters trying to get you to come home? Like, do they not miss you? Going, listen, we know you can fundraise from here.
They do, yeah, but they normally say, you know, in most families it's the mum asking the child to come home. In our family, it's the children asking the mother to come home.
No plans, I assume. This is your life's work.
Well, I mean, I am spending more time at home now, definitely. But if I wasn't doing this, what would I be doing? I'd be on the golf course.
Listen,
no, thanks.
You're just such an inspiration, Mags. And the documentary, it is, of course, on Thursday night in RTE1, In the Name of the Sun. Yeah, it's so inspirational.
There's
I just can't imagine what
you've given us
you've
this
gone
morning.
through. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Now, if you're looking for an easy party dish that's sure to impress your guests, you've got the recipe right here.
We certainly have. Mindi Keane from Mama Nagy's joins us now in the kitchen to show us how to make some onion bhajis. Good morning to you.
Good morning, guys. And I
You've
hope
burnt
you're ready.
the mouth off Alan already.
I've had a taste already.
That might quieten him
It's
up for a while.
Oh, yeah, quieten you up. Shut me up. The best way to keep me.
Perfect. OK, so onion bhajis are made with chickpea flour, not regular flour, OK? So chickpea flour is just chickpeas ground up into a flour.
Oh, right, OK.
Just so the dry chickpeas. So you just basically, I'm not going to measure this, but I'm sure all the ingredients is on your recipe.
Yeah, it's on our website.
So I'm just going to add possibly a cupful, OK? So
possibly a cupful. I love
one of them.
This is the sort of cooking I love. Just throw a bit in.
I don't do measuring. So a little bit of that, and you sieve it, because you'll find that chickpea even have little, they stick together and create little lumps. So you just want them to sort of sieve it through and then use your hands and just take the rest of it. There won't be any lumps in it, it's just the flour just sticking together. OK, so once you've done that, time for your spices. A bit of baking powder.
Does that get to crisp? Is that what it is? Like, because a chickpea or like an onion bhaji, they're nice and crunchy, aren't they?
Well, they're fried.
Yeah.
That's why they're crispy. And
but is it
the batter?
The chickpea
it's probably the
that kinda
batter does help a little bit,
Okay.
So into that, half a teaspoon of salt. Now, when I say half a teaspoon, these are quite small, so go off your own teaspoon. So I might put a little bit more in than I'm putting in. OK, and then I'm going to put a little bit of chilli in. I'm just going to put a quarter of a teaspoon of chilli. I like them quite spicy. I don't know about you guys.
It's not too bad.
Is it not? There's red out there
you
anyway.
Can taste
so
it, though.
half a teaspoon of garam masala, and I've got cumin powder here, and turmeric, the good old turmeric, a bit of that. So all the spices. I've got some fennel seeds. I'm going to throw some fennel seeds in as well. That gives it an extra little bit of an aniseed flavour. And into this, do you need some water?
Tears running down the eyes now.
Well, it is a little
You're
bit
just going to add a little bit of water to make it into a nice dough shape, not dough even, batter.
A batter, yeah.
Yeah. OK, so you don't want it too thin, because what happens when you add the ingredients is watery, because it's all vegetables.
Yes.
It releases water.
Oh,
OK.
yeah, OK. Because even we're calling them onion bhajis, you're going to add lots more stuff into it.
Well, I'm going to do them. Yeah, I'm going to add a few more bits in. You can have them just plain onion bhajis, but I think they're quite boring. So I would always I've got a bit of spinach. It's what you have in your fridge, vegetable-wise. Bit of onion, spinach.
Is it just when an onion bhaji is just pure chopped up onion in it? Yeah.
They might have a bit of grated potato in as well. I've got some courgettes. I'm going to throw some onions in. So basically, you'd have all that mix in there, but I'm going to put a bit in by a bit. Bit of coriander. I'm going to throw a bit of carrot in. Some chilies. Now, I haven't taken the seeds out.
There's very little onion in that.
There is. You'll wait and see. And then I'm going to... Potatoes go in.
So now, if there was something that you have to have in it, are the potatoes kind of a must, or is it...
The onions, obviously, because it's onion bhaji.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. But there's nothing else, nothing else there that is a must, really.
Hands.
Hands.
What do you mean? There's nothing.
Well, just like the potatoes, you've thrown an awful lot in there. Could I do it without the onions?
Well, then it's not going to be an onion bhaji, is
It could be just a bhaji then.
Well, you're just going to get a big lump of...
potato bhaji. God, I like that.
You can't change your recipe.
Well, you've changed it. You put loads in there.
Yeah, but that's because I want it more veggie.
OK, right.
So it's great for the kids, to get a bit of veg into the kids. You'll find that you'll just squash it and you release more water.
Now,
OK.
I'm just looking at that and going, wow, is that going to...
That is going to turn into that. Let me just turn that up a little bit. So you heat your oil to quite a medium to high heat, OK?
Yeah.
So what you'd normally do if you had the time is just do one, try it and see if it needs more chilies, more whatever, salt.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm just going to...
Now, do you see the spices that you had? For people who are watching in this morning and they're going, OK, I'm going to make these, but I don't have all those spices. What are maybe the 1 or 2 spices that you definitely need?
Well, this is my spice tin, right? So
Yeah.
you always have garam masala.
Garam masala.
Turmeric. Garam masala has about 14 to 16 spices in, so always have that. Turmeric, and that's it, really.
Okay.
Okay, right, let's crack them in.
Let's put them in. So you basically, I've made sure that's really hot. I'm just going to roll it together. Just make sure you've got enough. You don't want it squeeze it because you don't want to create a lump. You just want it to be fluffy, so it just...
Oh, right, you're not squeezing it, you're just...
I'm just going to drop a bit in, see if it's ready to go. Yep, it's ready to go. And then I'm just going to drop this in, a little bit into there, and
nice
you
little
can...
sizzle.
Yeah.
What type of oil? Is it just vegetable oil?
That's just regular cooking oil.
Okay.
Plain vegetable. You can use sunflower oil, cooking oil, whatever you prefer, you know. Obviously, don't go for...
And you don't need to have them all covered. Do you see the
it
top
does
is sticking
help.
up? Okay.
Well, you're going to flip them. I'm going to flip them in a minute. I'm just going to put these in here.
Just 3 would be enough, yeah.
Yeah, and then I'm going to flip them. And then what you'll do is you're browning them then. So I'm just going to put this in, and then...
Because you obviously don't... The oil can't be too hot either. You don't want them to brown
you don't want
on the
them to
outside
cook
too quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't want them to cook before the time, basically. Yeah. So the first one that I put in, I'm going to flip that over just so it covers, and then again with that one as well, OK? If you find that the mixture, because you'll find that it could be that the mixture, they're starting to break a little bit, that's because the mixture might need a bit more.
Oh, of the chicken.
Yeah.
They're really spicy.
I'm horse too into there. That's a bit too quick. You go on, eat up there.
No,
Eat up, Alan. Come on now.
I am. Do you know what? I want to try one of these directly out of the really crispy ones.
Yeah. Well, you might...
So how long do you
You've
kind
got
of
probably
recommend?
about 8 to 10 minutes. You're just doing them
really?
lightly.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
So you put,
Okay,
that's
so
why
we
you've
won't
got
get to them
pre-made
then.
one. But you can have some after.
And how do you know that they're done?
Because they'll be brown and they'll start to... Of course.
You're asking all the great questions this morning, Tommy.
This is my morning today.
Because they'll be cooked. They'll stop...
the
sizzling will stop around them, so you'll have less of a sizzle, and they'll float on the top. Yeah.
OK, so they'll float up.
They'll float up.
Oh, there you go.
That's how you know.
I never knew that. So
Good question.
done. The sizzle, you get less of a sizzle around
Yes.
it.
Yeah. So can you see that that's now a little bit thicker, so it won't fall apart as much. So if you find that they're starting to fall apart in there, that's because they're not binding. And don't add water, add more of your chickpea flour.
OK.
Can we take the one that you put in first, just to give us an example of what it will sort of look like?
Well, yeah, let's have a look. See if it's ready.
That's after about 4 minutes, I'd say.
Yeah.
So.
Let me just move that.
OK,
look at that, yeah.
You see that?
Yeah.
And to be fair, that is great for kids.
Do you
to
know
have
what?
a bit load of veg into them.
I know it's
Put all those spices.
It's a bit deep
Well, you
fried.
just
Well, you
don't.
wouldn't put the
No, but
chilies
listen,
in.
it might be deep fried, but so are crisps. So is all the other stuff, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if it's a good oil, would
And
you...
it's clean oil.
Clean oil.
Yeah. So basically, you're using veg here. So people always say, what do you do with the oil? You just sieve it and reuse it. Sieve it, put it back into the bottle with the funnel, and then reuse it. It's only had vegetables.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to be waiting now until that's done because I really want to try one of those crispy ones coming out of the thing.
We're going to have to try one of these now.
Yeah, Warren, do you like an old onion, potato, everything bhaji?
Mwah, absolutely
Mindi, thank you so much for that. That was absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
They really are. They're very hot.
Sorry, I didn't know I was meant to be here, so I was outside having the chats. OK, I'm back now. Our next guest shared the screen with everyone, from Anthony Hopkins to Renee Zellweger, and now Paul Mescal. I'm going to be chatting with acclaimed actor Emily Watson after the break. A mother's love knows no bounds, certainly with their sons, and that's clearly evident in the psychological drama God's Creatures. Starring Paul Mescal and Emily Watson, the film sees Mescal's character accused of sexual assault and his mother, Emily Watson, doing everything in her power to protect him. It is a very strong, powerful movie. I recently sat down with Emily Watson to chat about the film. Let's take a look.
Mom?
It's different, isn't he? On entrance test?
Do you reckon?
Mother knows.
It's exactly like it was back in the day.
So long ago. I wouldn't get hung up on it if I were you.
Try to leave a place only to find it following you.
Emily Watson, thank you so much for chatting to us today.
Pleasure.
I'm sure you must be wrecked because you're talking about a film that is incredibly dark, but it's when we talk about the stereotypical Irish mammy, she's a lovely figure, but Aileen has a lot going on. What drew you to her?
Well, I read it really as a Greek tragedy. I think it has a very strong, universal sense of a mother's love for her son that is too much, that is too strong, that is too, you know, the moment you see them together, there's something off. And I think that, you know, that's very universal. I think maybe it's particularly Irish that if a mother gives her son an alibi, that's where the story stops. And I'm not sure that other places have that same reverence for a mother's word and the fact that she instinctively, without taking a breath, lies. But he immediately, she's told that lie, he threatens to leave and she doubles down, and that's it, the path is set.
You said there's something different about Irish mammies' relationships to their son as the
Well,
daughter.
I don't know that for sure, but I just think that I know that this is a, you know, because I think there have been cases similar to this, that a mother gives an alibi to her son and that's it.
As the daughter of an Irish woman who's got a son, trust me, they're on a pedestal. So in that moment when Aileen, as you say, she reacts, there's not a moment of hesitation, because in the rest of the movie, Aileen tells us so much without words, with glances, with pauses and reflections. That was an interesting juxtaposition for her in how she interacted with the world and her community when it came to her son.
Yes, I think she has given him a place in her life that is too elevated, too powerful, and it's very dangerous. And he's kind of got a bit missing in his nature. He has, you know, his moral compass is off, and he abuses her love and her devotion, manipulates it.
It's interesting to watch that manipulation.
Because she steals for him, she lies for him, you know.
And it just seems very natural, like automatically she robbed for him.
Yeah.
Didn't even think twice.
No, and it's quite fun. It's fun, you know. And, you know, I can't remember the line. He's sort of, you know, this is great crack. What happens if we get caught? Kind of, and she's, you know, it's like they're having a laughing. They're having a...
Because they're in it together.
Yes.
And it's like at one stage you're like, is there a Jocasta complex going on here? Because they basically go out on dates together.
Yes.
And exclude everyone else.
Yes, and that's definitely there. But it's never spoken about, it's never acknowledged, but there is something of it is just a little bit not right.
Yeah, it's how the community and Aileen double down and protect Brian, who everyone's iffy about.
Yeah.
So when you're in that, like, I thought there was really funny bits in it, where Aileen comes home and automatically, he's got naked throughout the house. And she's just picking it up.
Yeah.
Were you sitting there when you were watching it going, rather than doing it, going, for God's sake, this fella's
I had quite
useless.
a funny conversation with Paul's mother last night. I said, I bet you recognise that scene. We had a laugh about that. No, and I mean, that's brilliant, but it is also, she's washing the evidence. She doesn't know it.
Yeah.
But those are the clothes in which he was wearing that night. So I think, you know, it's got a double storytelling.
Yeah. With it being so dark, you shot in lockdown, you know, when everything was mad. You're in Donegal. Oh, God, I have to talk about the accent. You've done Limerick. You've done Belfast. And as the daughter of Kerry, how did you get the Kerry accent? It's amazing.
I had a really good dialect coach, and we went over it like inch by inch by inch, so I knew exactly how every syllable should sound.
Set a lovely tone. It was a pleasure watching you in this film, Emily Watson.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking to me.
Pleasure.
Was there anyone else out? Do you remember?
Couldn't tell you.
Everyone's got their eyes closed.
Who do you think I am at all, Mom?
Do you not feel anything about what's happened here? Is there no feeling in you? You have this impossible image of me. Seems like the whole world has turned upside down.
Oh, God's creatures in the dark is like, it's very tough, but well worth seeing. It is, but it's like, you're like this all the time. She's amazing in it. Now we've got lots more to come this morning, including hairstylist to the stars, Michael Douglas, and best-selling author Carmel Harrington. We'll talk to you shortly on Ireland AM. Hello, welcome back to Ireland AM. It's a beautiful day. Get outside in your shorts.
On the way, we're going to be chatting to the best-selling author Carmel Harrington as she takes us from Donegal to Bermuda.
Yep.
As you do, for her new historical romance novel.
It is perfect. Alan is with the hair maestro, Michael Douglas. Adam, what's coming up?
Yes, we certainly are. I think you might need Michael after that wind out there. They've been blown away. Michael, you have worked on many a superstar over the years in your career. But you're going to show our viewers this morning how to recreate that glam at home.
Yes, we are. On Ali here, we're going to do something that people have been seeing a lot on Love Island and TikTok and stuff like that. A nice little sleek kind of ballerina look, but with this little glam twist.
A ballerina look with a glam twist. We like it. I'm loving it already. What could you do with this? Very little.
I'm not a magician.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like,
Okay. Major news breaking earlier on. Major news. Forget about the housing crisis and everything else.
Forget about that.
Frosties will no longer be in the multi-packs.
To be fair, that is big news in our household.
Is it?
Yeah, the kids, when we get a multi-pack, which is very rare.
I was just about to say.
Kids straight for the Frosties.
Because
Why?
35% more sugar than cornflakes or Cocoa Pops.
Because there used to be 2 Frosties and 2 Cocoa Pops and two Ricicles.
Ricicles.
But yeah, Ricicles are long gone.
Long gone. Start.
Long gone.
God, I love
Frosties. So now really, we're going to get multi-packs and the kids are like, I don't really want
Rice. There's nothing in the multi-pack. Laura says, Frosties were always the first cereal I would eat from the variety pack. I feel like my child has been taken away.
Laura, sorry.
Laura.
It's tough when that happens, isn't it?
Sure, and this is it. Keith has just said chocolate bars are definitely getting smaller as well. Listen, it's a good thing because obesity levels are huge and sugar for kids is bad. But at the same time, what were we like back in the day? Did we just get sugar all the time? Has it changed?
No, it's definitely changed because it was a treat. I always remember not being allowed to have, you wouldn't ever think that you'd have a chocolate bar a day.
Absolutely.
Be like Sunday, you'd be allowed to go and get a Mars bar or something.
We used to have it on a Friday. Going to school on a
Yeah,
Friday
but see,
as a
that
treat.
was the thing, as a treat. But it's not good, Tommy, if you're still paying the same price for a smaller bar.
Well, inflation now.
There's a chocolate shortage.
I'm
not even joking.
There's
a chocolate shortage for the last few years, cocoa shortage because of what's happening in the Amazon and the environmental factors and famine.
Is there?
I'm not even joking. I'm not even joking. There is. So they're using a lower quality chocolate and things like roses or all the big
anyway,
packs of Christmas.
Frosties have been pulled out.
There you go.
It's not a big shock, to be honest with you. But do you know what I think is a big travesty? Is the way you don't get toys in the cereal anymore. That was my favourite thing.
Loved it. The stickers and the things you put on your bike spokes.
Wheels.
Yeah, but because they're sort of saying you can choke on it now, or
choking
you could
hazard.
Choking hazard and all this.
Basically, what we're saying here is Tommy Bowe is willing to put his children's lives. Take his lives in their hands in order to get a toy for a bike wheel.
They could choke on anything. It's very scary, and you have to teach them to not do that. Absolutely, don't agree with that, but. Okay. Where am I going? Let's move on to the next story.
The other thing we were talking about earlier on, there was a survey that Irish parents are the lenient.
Most lenient.
We've lost control of this.
Most lenient parenting in
Alan,
Europe.
You're just given one job to read one text message, for goodness sake. As a psychologist, Declan says, I worry about today's children. Parents should consider that attempting to retroactively fix their own childhood experiences might not be what their children need. Hear to that.
Because a part of the research showed that Irish parents are more lenient because of how they were treated as children, and they don't want that to happen to their own children.
You can spot the kids nowadays that their parents are very lenient on them.
Because they get away with murder.
Yeah, you know when you're in getting some food somewhere and they're just
running around.
Well, they're kind of expecting the staff to be the babysitters, and you're like, no, they're paid to do a completely different job, not mind your children.
No, I do. That annoys me. If you're in a restaurant, there's kids just running around and literally causing mayhem, and the parents sit there.
Absolutely.
Thank you to everyone for sending in their messages on that one. Coming up after the break,
Bring
we
back
are
the treats.
sitting down with celebrity stylist Michael Douglas. We'll see you then. Next guest is a hairstylist to the stars, having worked with the likes of Kate Moss, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Claudia Schiffer.
And I'm glad to mention, I'm glad you mentioned hairstylist Miriam, because he also shares the name with another famous face. Yes, you're very welcome, Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas.
Good morning to you, Michael Douglas.
Hello. I disappoint people everywhere I go because they're always expecting the real one.
No, has it ever happened really?
No. Well, yeah, when I turn up, they go, especially at a restaurant.
Oh, and you give the name Michael Douglas.
It's you, the hairdresser.
Have you met him?
I have once, yeah. So I worked on the One Show for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And he was on the One Show one day, so I went along. But did you know that his real name is not Michael Douglas?
What is it?
His dad changed. I can't remember.
Kirk Douglas changed his name.
He changed his name. So Michael Keaton's real name is Michael Douglas. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, he had to become Michael Keaton because there was already Michael Douglas.
So you don't get to be Batman?
I'm the only original one.
Michael Douglas.
That's it.
Yes, that's the point I'm making.
But you could have been Batman.
Yes.
Like when you think about it, you're like straight to San Francisco, basicing, stinked.
Ant-Man.
Batman.
I'm that small.
Ant-Man. That's what you get. It's all. It's
I
all
love
good.
the restaurant in London there going, Michael Douglas.
Michael Douglas and Catherine. Michael Douglas and To be fair, when you and Davina walk in, it's going to be pretty nice.
It's going to be, oh, that's great.
I occasionally post pictures of Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones and I say, me and Davina are out tonight. You know, sort of go, what?
They're going, what's going on here? You have to do that joint dinner. You're in the world of hairdressing and elevating to that level when you become a household name.
Yeah.
Not many people do that.
No, I mean, it happened by fluke, really, I think. I mean, I was a teacher for a long time and then I managed to get a kind of good credibility because I was working at London Fashion Week, Paris and New York in the 90s. If I had an Instagram account in the 1990s, I'd have 1 million followers, like I was doing everybody back then.
Oh, my gosh.
And then I landed a job on TV, I think because I'd been a teacher. I was quite good at presenting and chatting and stuff like that. I met a TV producer and I said, I want to be the Jamie Oliver of hair. And he said, right, let's try and do that. I never did that, obviously, but I tried, you know. And it worked out really well. But I think being on TV and things like that really helped kind of get my name around.
And what was it like back then? Because you think sort of in those days, like it wasn't even that long ago, but has it changed? Because like the glamour of Claudia Schiffer and Kate Moss and those big shows, and I know they still exist, but there doesn't seem to be the glamour that was back then.
They're models now. There's no supermodels, it seems, anymore. The Kardashians and influencers seem to have taken over that role. So yeah, it's completely different now, I think. The Kate Mosses and the Yasmin Le Bons and all the rest of it just don't seem to be as kind of influential as they once were. So it is a shame because I loved fashion shows and they're just not quite the same anymore, really. They don't carry the same kind of weight. But you know, the world moves on, doesn't it? There's other things to kind of get stuck into.
But it is a sort of thing that everyone, you go into your hairdresser with a picture of Kate Moss going, give me that.
Give me that, yeah.
As a hairdresser, how do you keep a straight face?
I mean, I love pictures. I know, it is quite funny. Jennifer Aniston's the big one, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody still brings in pictures of Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
But I understand what they want from that. They want her hair and they want to feel a bit like Jennifer Aniston. So I don't tend to kind of engage with too much kind of shaming around that. I just want to say, I understand what you mean. Caramel highlights, long straight hair. You want to walk out here feeling like a movie star. Yeah. Let's try and make that happen. You know?
Yeah.
And speaking of movies, because you did work on a lot of movies as well and worked with very big names.
That was the most exciting bit of my career, I think. You're isolated on a movie set. You're not allowed to take photos or talk about it until after the movie. But on it, you're in a place where magic is being created. I mean, the movie industry is the most magical place. If anyone wants to be a hairdresser, aim for the movies. It's just fantastic.
Really? I would have thought it was a lot of sitting around.
It's really hard work, but it's just... You're with these actors that you see on the big screen. You're with the directors. And not only are you a hairdresser, you're a go-between between the director and the actor. The actors want you to watch them on set, give them some feedback. The director doesn't often give them feedback. The interesting one is when they say, watch what the director face does when I do my scene. You know, so you watch the director, you watch the scene, and then they go, what did he do? And I say, he laughed. They go, OK, great. You know, so
Are these big stars we're talking about?
Yeah, we're talking about big stars.
And like, who have you worked with on the movies?
Well, Ewan McGregor and Paul Bettany, Olivia Munn, Gwyneth Paltrow, Johnny Depp, you know, people like that, you know.
So who was the most nervous wrecky, the most star like...
What's the director think? What's the director thinking?
Please tell me they like
so nervous, yeah. The interesting thing, I think, is that my observation is that men are a lot more relaxed on movie sets.
Yeah.
You know,
I can imagine.
You could apply that to pretty much any industry, I think.
Was Gwyneth trying to clear out your private parts even back then? Was she into that?
She didn't offer me a colonic.
She didn't offer you a colonic. That's what she does now these days, going around just offering colonics to absolutely everyone. It's gas. So, of course, your girlfriend is Davina McCall.
Yes.
Davina, who we all adore. So
she's lovely, isn't she?
Yeah, she's a dote.
Was your requirement to have a girlfriend who has amazing hair? Like, is that a part of it? She's got great hair.
It helps enormously my career, because if she was a big shaggy mess, wouldn't look good on me, would it? You know.
No.
So she has got great hair, so it's a relief, really. It's easy to style, and I've done it for a long time. Oh, is this us here?
This is you.
Yeah, OK.
Because you do a podcast together as well. I mean, but, like, you've known Davina for over 20 years, like going back to Big Brother when she started. And
Yeah. I mean, maybe 2000, I think we met. I did her hair for a TV commercial. And we became friends ever since. I did her hair for all Big Brother and all these TV shows and all the rest of it. And then, you know, it all fell into place at some point, you know.
That's lovely.
Yeah, it's been interesting. What's interesting, I think, is that as I do her hair now, I just slot back into the old relationship. You know?
Okay.
So it's not.
Different, yeah.
It's no different than it ever has been. I just blow dry her hair, try and make it look good. And sometimes she goes, "I don't really like what you've done at the front." I go, "Okay, crack, you're right," and change it a little bit. So it's easy to slot back into the relationship.
And you do work on the podcast together, Making the Cut, and I love the thing. It's like TripAdvisor for life.
Yes, it's a recommendation podcast. So we don't slag anything off. We're not nasty about anything. If we experience something that we don't want to share with you, we just don't share it.
Yeah.
But if it's something good, then we say, you lot really got to go and experience this. So Dublin will be in the podcast next week.
Of course we are.
Something to recommend.
Of course we are.
Because you did go to a place in Manchester, I was listening, I really enjoyed it, where people just viciously attack you, like they're mean to you.
Yes.
And you really enjoyed it.
Yes, of course, the diner, Karen's Diner.
Karen's Diner.
That's the thing. I love this.
It's brutal in there. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe how vulgar it was, actually. I thought it would be illegal to speak to somebody like that in a restaurant. And they give you hats and write, you know, vulgar stuff and all the rest of it. But it's hilarious. If they open one here, you've got to go.
And when people can be mean about you, Davina was on. I was watching this unfold on social media. One night on the Mass Dancer, you had cut Davina's hair in this tiny little fringe.
Yeah.
People went... Like, I was watching people calling for you to be, like, death
I've been cancelled about 5 times.
And it was a wig.
Yes.
People get really worked up over hair.
Oh, well, I think they look at the post, they don't read the context of it, and they just make an assumption about it and then go for you.
Looking at it there.
But
they were mad.
Yes, I mean, it's so funny, isn't it? So we do 10 episodes on The Masked Singer, so I try and find 10 hairstyles, and I think, well, I'll do 2 wigs, 2 updos, you know, 2 downdos, 1 wavy, 1 straight. You know, we're just trying to find a selection of things. But the wig I thought people would get straight away.
No.
But it was a love-hate. Lots of people loved it. Lots of people hate it.
But you're going to get that, aren't you? I mean, is hair like fashion? Are there trends? Is there a trend at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to do something a little bit later, actually, on Ali's hair. So we'll do some kind of slick-back ballerina bun. I mean, Sam McKnight's been doing this quite a lot on London Fashion Week recently. So it's a really nice look. It's on Love Island. It's a TikTok trend. So we'll play around with that a little bit. But there's lots of very loose, lazy hair knocking around, like hair that's kind of curled, but also a bit straight.
This
is very nice.
Is Muireann very on trend? Our Muireann's
I've gone back to the side parting recently.
Our Muireann's always on trend.
I'm bringing back the side parting.
So yeah, we'll play around with some hair a little bit later, which would be nice. Yeah.
I love when we do that. Yeah, Ali's going to be here a little bit later on because Michael is going to stay put right here, and we're going to you're going to be showing us how to do your slicked back bun. At home, you're sorted. For people, hopefully we'll go low enough for people with big ears that we can hide it.
Yeah,
that's what we're going to do.
Play around with that. Yes.
Okay, we're looking for. Thanks very much for staying with us. And after the break, also best-selling author Carmel Harrington will be here to tell us about her new novel. We'll see in a few minutes.
Well, she's a USA Today, Irish Times and Amazon best-selling novelist whose latest book, The Girl from Donegal, is a sweeping historical romance.
Daniel O'Donnell's going to be singing it as soon as we know about it. Carmel Harrington, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, you're making me laugh.
That's
Wouldn't
the
that
next
be good?
step.
Is he not going to come out now and serenade me? I mean, I thought that was...
Please welcome...
No. We did invite Daniel O'Donnell on the show. There's no comment from his team this morning.
It's the girl from Donegal, not the guy from Donegal.
The girl from Donegal. This is your 11th novel, and you do that thing, Carmel, where you've got a book a year.
Yes.
It's been hard going. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, well, this one is, there's 3 girls from Donegal, but it starts in 1939. Eliza Lavery gets an invitation to go to the other side of the world, to Bermuda, which she accepts, and she sets sail from Donegal on board the SS Athenia, which is a real-life ship, and the real-life events that happen on that, it's just at the outbreak of World War II.
Yeah.
And things happen on that ship, a lot of things happen on that ship, and it changes not just her life, but the lives of many other passengers, with kind of ripples and repercussions for 80 years.
And why Bermuda?
I know.
Because you got to go there for research?
Yeah, I do like to research in person everywhere that I write about.
Very nice.
Yeah, I do. So I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next, very carefully, I might add. Well, do you know what? It was so weird, Tommy. It was like every road kind of pointed me to Bermuda. Like initially, I found a snippet in a BBC historical archive that spoke about Bermuda, and it was about a woman who left Ireland to go to Bermuda in 1939, and that kind of sparked the whole kind of my imagination going initially. So I thought, where's Bermuda? Is it in the Caribbean? It's not. And I thought, I don't know much about it, but it has so many connections to Ireland. And like back in kind of the mid-1600s, 3 explorers who eventually ended up in Bermuda were on the coast of Ireland and spent a few weeks in Galway, I believe. And so then they went on to Bermuda, and they named one of the main islands in Bermuda Ireland Island. Oh. And then the convict ships that were sent out in the mid-16th century, they ended up in Bermuda. So the Irish, of course, were with the Scottish and the Native Americans and the blacks, causing havoc there, trying to do uprisings against the English who ruled.
Yeah.
And then after the famine, more went over there after the famine. So there's a lot of Irish connections. So when I kind of read all of that, I thought, it has to be Bermuda for my international location. It really had to be.
And did you discover connections?
Yes.
Like you did? You did all this for your own family?
Yeah. Well, I had done my DNA testing a few years ago. And what came up on my maternal and paternal, a lot of relatives in Bermuda. And I was going, how is this? Like, I couldn't really understand it. My mum is English. She's from London. Dad's from Wexford. But it turns out that on the English side, one of the first governors was a Tucker, and that's my family, my grandmother's maiden name. So on my mother's side, we were kind of the rulers in Bermuda, but on my dad's side, we were on those convict ships back that left Ireland.
Lovely.
So I just thought it was just wonderful, because both sides of my family, we have these relatives.
That dichotomy of...
They're far distant cousins now, like they're 5th and 6th and 7th cousins there, but I thought that was kind
of But there are cousins there?
Yeah, there's cousins there, yeah.
That's amazing,
Of all kind of nationalities, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you love history and love kind of historical fiction.
Yes.
But you hadn't written historical fiction before.
No.
So why did you think that this was the right time to do it?
I don't know, it just felt right. I always trust my gut. Like, as you mentioned, it's my 11th novel, right? And what I do, every book is original from the last. So I really do try hard to find a completely new story to keep the readers interested.
Wow.
And I was just kind of, as I said, when I came across that archival slip, and I thought I could write maybe about ancestors of people who left Donegal in 1939, but then I thought, no, I kind of really want to know more about this character, Eliza. So before I knew it, it was a dual timeline, 50% in 1939 and 50 in the future.
I love
kind
that.
of hooked now.
Yeah, you think that this could be...
Really, the future?
Yeah, and I don't know for always, because I would never like to say, I kind of don't like to stay in a lane. I do like to kind of move around a bit. But I did want to write a love story, and I'd never written a love story. There's always love in my stories, but they're family love, sibling love, friendship love, and sometimes romantic love. But I wanted to write a sweeping love story, the kind of ones that...
The epics. The epics.
Like
love
the
an
big
epic.
Ones. Yeah, and it is.
It's hard to be original, though, isn't it, whenever you're trying to do the love story, because it's such a big thing, but how do you do the whole falling in love part?
You get a girl called Elizabeth, a guy called Mr. Darcy. It's grand. That's never been done before, has it?
Actually, my central character is Eliza, so maybe I'm not that original. I actually use family names, though. So I went into my family tree, and so for the names for the characters, they're all family names from back in the 30s. Yeah, and Eliza is one of them. Yeah,
it's really interesting. And you talk about family because you have 2 younger kids and a stepchild as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
And you talk about kind of fostering their creativity because we were talking a lot about kids earlier on. And do you think it's important? Do you think kids have lost that creativity, or what's your take on it?
No, I actually think that they're a lot more creative now than it was when I was a kid. There are more opportunities to be creative, whether it's creating TikToks and content, you know, on social media. But even in school, I think teachers now embrace creative sides of students, and they do. Like Nate does a lot of projects. He just did one recently on ancient Greece, and he was able to really let his imagination fly. And yesterday he presented me with, he'd written a letter, he's doing World War II, and he wrote a letter to a friend. He was in the trenches in France, and this letter, tea-stained and everything, it was so creative, and it allowed him to use his storytelling skills. And I think that teachers now do show that. But for me, I go into schools a lot, and what I like to do is there's always one person in every class that wants to be a writer but is too shy and too nervous to share that. And I was that kid when I went to school. So I do like to go in and try and encourage that and foster it and tell them that it's okay not to be sporty. It's okay maybe not to be good at maths, and that you can excel at different things. And being creative is just as important as being academically successful.
And it feels like our education system is going that way, recognising other areas. And I know you've created a bursary in your old school, Loretto, in Wexford, for creative writing, which is so lovely. And
that was nice to do,
It's a lovely thing to do. But as you mentioned TikTok there a second ago.
Yes.
And we know that TikTok now, it's a thing, right? We're not big on it or anything, but Book Talk.
Yeah.
I went on to that, and it's fascinating. They've created superstars out of people. You're like, did you pass your junior cert? Like, with the writing, with creative writing. How does it feel to be an author and to realise the power of that? Because it is in people's hands now. Like, people are creating the superstars in writing.
It is.
Which is amazing.
It is. And you don't know what's going to go viral. I mean, you hope wouldn't it be nice to go viral, but you don't know what's going to catch someone's imagination. And certain things, one person runs with it, and before you know it, you see like Colleen Hoover's success, who's got like 3 books in the bestsellers charts at the minute simultaneously. And it's because Book Talk made her a bigger star.
And it's not linear, like with Emily Henry.
Yes.
Like, there's books from 7 years ago that have gone straight to the bestsellers list. And it's a
different type of creativity then, isn't it? Because your creativity is actually writing the book, but then you have to try and spin it a different way.
You do. But you know what I love? Like, even my daughter, right, she on Book Talk found A Man Called Ov, which I read years ago. Like, it's a book that was out several years ago. But she picked it up and she bought it out of her own pocket money, and she bought it. And I thought, well, isn't that great? So she found a book that I don't think she would have picked up otherwise. And that's great. And I think it has
a lot more people into reading.
Yeah. So
it's amazing.
If Book Talk want to make me viral, I'm
She's there. Carmel's ready to go. She's ready to go. Do whatever the hell you need.
Well, listen, there's no doubt this can go viral. The girl from Donegal, Carmel Harrington, your 11th novel. Thank you so much for coming in and talking to us this morning.
Yeah, out March 23rd. Get Daniel O'Donnell to do it on Book Talk. The girl from Donegal, viral. He's gone viral on TikTok before.
All the time.
Could you imagine?
Daniel,
I actually
Carmel's
could
ready for you.
It. He'd be brilliant at it.
He'd be amazing at it.
Anything to help Donegal.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to talk to you, Carmel.
Thank you.
Now, up next on Ireland AM, celebrity hairstylist Michael Douglas shows us how to create a chic, sleeked back bun. We'll see you here in a few minutes.
Bun.
We'll hide the massive ears. Talk to you in a second. Hello, welcome back. Alan's having an old chat over there to himself. You okay, darling?
Sorry, Mern.
He's fine, he's fine. Celebrity hairstylist Michael Douglas is back to show us how to get a perfect, simple, sexy, slicked back look. You've promised us sexy at 10:15 in the morning.
Well, that's this. This is the sexy bit.
It's leading into Holly and Phil. They bring all the sexy. You know what I mean? That's what we need. So, this is right. When we do all this kind of stuff, right? This is going to be simple. This is a new thing. But when it comes to, the 5-day challenge, the 7-day challenge, not washing your hair, your hair, you should wash it every day. You should wash it every second day.
I know.
There's so many rules.
Yes, there's social media for you. It's like 5 things you should never do and all of that. I don't like any of that.
Yeah.
You can wash your hair as often or as little as you like. What you've got to remember is the scalp is your skin.
Yeah.
It's just skin. It's the same as your forehead and it goes straight back
Hi, Ali.
there.
Ali's here, by the way.
Exactly.
Ali's here.
So you want to treat it like you would your skin. And if you cleanse your skin every day, you should probably cleanse your scalp every day.
Yeah.
More dirt and debris appears here. A lot of people have a sensitive scalp. So if you do, a range like Aveeno is very good for that. This is a great range if you're dealing with sensitive scalps or hair that gets slightly irritated or scalps that get slightly irritated. But wash your hair as often or as little as you like.
Want.
Yes.
Can I ask you about, as I'm like prone to dandruff or whatever, what do you make of those, the in the shower, the brushes?
Yes, I like them. Yeah.
Okay,
They're
good.
good, yeah.
Good. Like an exfoliation.
You want to exfoliate your scalp in the same way you would your skin. Skin cells build up there. If you get too much build up, you get bacteria that forms underneath, you get dandruff, psoriasis, all sorts of problems. You need to shift it. So if you feel using a brush or scrubbing your scalp a little bit of sugar in the shampoo is quite good as well to create a little grain, acts as a scalp scrub. Shampoo is for the roots of your hair. Conditioner is for the ends of your hair.
This is something I've just
Gold,
discovered.
right?
Don't be washing down here all the time.
People put shampoo on the hair and then they scrub it and then they go, my hair gets really knotty, you know, when I rinse it out. And it's like, of course it does. You've been rubbing it for the last 5 minutes or so. You shampoo like this and you condition like this.
Okay, it's simple. Ali's looking at me going, yeah, I knew that, Marion. Oh, my God.
I'm learning loads.
We're learning all of these. Can we talk about, because everything these days, there's 75 tools for everything. Heat protection.
Yes. So one of my favourite ranges is the OGX Argan Oil of Morocco range. So you've got shampoo, conditioner, a treatment in here and some great styling products. But there's a heat protection spray in this range that I use on every blow dry I do.
Yeah.
So it goes on damp hair, you blow dry it in, and then you could use heated tools over the top of it. So it protects to about 210 degrees centigrade. It's got styling products in there, so it's good for giving body and lift. Every time I blow dry Davina's hair, that's what I use. That's the blow dry spray I use.
You're getting the Davina treatment today. It doesn't matter when you put it in, how damp it is, how far away it is from the hair.
The thing to remember is the wetter your hair is, the more diluted the product gets. So I tend to take water out of the hair first, 30-40% of the water out of the hair first with a hairdryer, then put the product on. That way the product works loads better because it doesn't get so diluted. The drier your hair is, the more product benefit you'll get.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am learning
pretty good,
loads
right?
today. This is pretty good. Okay, so let's get this started. What do we have to do first for this sleek, sexy look?
So we've shampooed our hair, first of all, with the Argan Oil of Morocco range and then conditioned it, and then we put the heat protection spray on and used the old GHD straightening irons here, which are great. I mean, you can't beat the old GHDs.
I mean, come on, they're a classic.
They're great, right?
They're
so we've
classic.
ironed through the hair. You don't want to over-iron the hair. People do this a lot, where they take a section and they iron 2 or 3 times on the section. Heat only works once on the hair. Once you've put a pass through the hair, you can't keep doing it. You're just burning the hair. So one slow pass. You like that?
Bad.
Okay.
No wonder my hair is destroyed.
You're doing this, right? Yeah. So just needs one slow pass. So we've done that first of all.
Okay.
And then there's a look that's been floating around that we mentioned earlier, this kind of sleek ballerina look.
Yes.
I don't want to go too harsh with Ali's hair here. She's got a beautiful
I think we've
face,
got, is it Sammy in Love Island did it all the time?
Yes.
Because she's in the heat. There we go, this look here.
So
beautiful.
We're going to use the oil on her hair and just put quite a bit of that on. I'm going to keep it away from the roots so much and got it on the mid-lengths and ends.
And this is argan oil?
This is Argan Oil of Morocco, yeah. And we're just going to we're going to put quite a lot on, as you can see there, zigzagging it down the hair. And then we're just going to start to smooth that in. Now, what's great about this is, one, you get this really amazing, sheeny, shiny, glossy look.
Yeah.
But this is endlessly moisturising and conditioning the hair. That's why it's so good when you're on holiday.
Oh.
UV protection in there, UVA, UVB, all that kind of stuff. So you get a lot of protection and then a lot of nourishment. But you get this really nice, wet, sheeny shine on the hair. So let's just put lots of this on. A lot of people are really afraid of oil, and I understand why, because if you've done a lovely blow dry, like yours, of course. Don't touch your hair
Yeah,
there.
that's it.
Then oil's quite heavy, so it can sit quite heavy on the hair and crush the blow dry. So I don't want to do that. So that's why we're keeping it away from the roots. But that's why a lot of people are a bit afraid of oil. But this is the opposite.
Of what it's doing.
We're going to want to put loads on because we want this kind of sleek, shiny ends to the hair. And then the reason we've straightened it is so we can get this kind of slightly spiky
all over the place.
end. Yeah, so when we put the bun in, we'll get spikes of it coming out. It's just a little feature, really,
this is lovely.
of the
I'm looking forward to seeing this now.
Now, but you weren't before. You were thinking, oh, I don't want to see this.
No, I was like that all day. I don't want to see someone doing a bun. I never do a bun.
The brush you want to use, I like this vent brush. You can see there's hardly any bristles in it.
Okay.
And one of the reasons for that is a lot of people want to use this.
Yeah.
More friction, the more possibility of static electricity. Now, it's all right 1 or 2 brushes with this, But once you start brushing it a lot, you get into all sorts of hot water. So
Okay,
I like
so I
to
need
stay
to do
away from a bristle brush if you're going to brush your hair.
I think I've talked to you so long, we've got about a minute left.
Oh, OK.
I'm
Well,
so
let's
sorry.
get... No, that's all right. So I'm going to pull the hair back here like this, and then I'm going to spin her around so you can see what we're going to do with the ponytail. So we've got a couple of options here. But this, as you might be able to see here, if anyone can zoom in, is a ponytail band with 2 Kirby grips on.
Yes.
Yes. So let me spin you around here. Push that out like
Oh,
that.
lovely.
There
We
go.
spin.
Now, I'm going to grab the hair here. Let's have a little look that it looks nice at the front, because that's the most important bit.
You look gorgeous,
Few
as
little bits
always. You
down.
look fabulous.
And a little bit on this side as well. But if you watch what I do with the ponytail, we grab the hair like a fist.
Yeah.
We put one of the grips in there, and then we pass the other one around like this, and then pop that in there like that.
So you're not putting the ponytail right, you're tying it in a completely different way.
Completely different way. And the reason for that is that if you want to get that ponytail out, you just pull out the pin, it goes ding.
And it's
out.
done, yeah, rather
all
than pulling out the hair.
All the damage is done with removing the ponytail, you know.
Okay.
So what we're going to do now is get all this oily hair here, and then we're going to twist and twist and twist until it folds in on itself around. And then we'll use just a series of pins and grips, and you'll see we'll get these little spiky bits that stick out as a result.
This is very kind of Florence Pugh as well. She's been doing this a bit, hasn't she? With her buns, and there's been a lot kind of sticking up.
Yeah. So I really like this. A lot of people kind of go, oh, it's a bit lazy, you should tuck those bits in. But for every hairstyle, I'm always looking for what I'd call a feature to the hairstyle. So something slightly odd about it is what gives it its character, really. So spin you around a little bit there.
I think we can see, if we go this way, we can see you in the mirror.
Through the mirror.
Can we see Ali in the mirror here?
So you see you get these lovely little shiny bits, but we've not got lots of oil at the root, so the hair's not going to sit flat, and then we've got a few of these little fluffy bits sticking out here.
That's very Florence Pugh. She's doing a lot of that at the minute.
I knew all about Florence Pugh, and that's exactly the look I was going for.
It's gorgeous.
Super simple, easy to do, very effective, looks great in any outfit.
And that argan oil, if you've got it in, it's good for wash out. It's actually healthy for the hair, UV protection, as you said on holidays.
And it completely breaks down with the shampoo, so you don't need to worry about it feeling
Love
greasy or
it.
anything.
Michael Douglas, thank you so much for being with us this morning.
It's
A
a total
pleasure. And
pleasure.
Ali, mwah, you look fabulous. Now, we're almost out of time, lads. What's coming up tomorrow morning?
You really tucked those bits in, Michael.
Now, on the way tomorrow, we're going to be chatting to legendary actor Ian McKellen as he takes the stage in Mother Goose in The Board Gosh.
Plus, writer and comedian Anne Gilday will be talking all about
menopause.
See you tomorrow.
I'm Brian Lloyd. Have a great day. See you tomorrow.
Bye. See ya.